Last one on rancor and animosity, this anger issue. Anger is something that many of us struggle with, right? And we have to recognize that anger is actually given by God, right? Why did he give anger? Well, he gave anger so that we might be contrite. It causes us to repent. You know, you do something and you're like, that's terrible. I can't believe I just did that. And your sort of self-anger, right? The right type of anger causes you to repent. Or you see an unrighteous reality, people starving, and you get angry about it. You say, this isn't right. And it causes you to act. How do you use anger, though? In a fallen way. You direct it on others. So if you first at least recognize that I have anger for a reason, and if you can start to rehabilitate it, right? And begin to use your anger rightly, more than wrongly. I'll give it to you this way. I met with a group of young people yesterday after liturgy, and we were talking about the idea of conflict. And, you know, as siblings do, they fight. And so I said to one of them, I said, do you think it matters that you fight this way? Because do you fight this way with your friends? He says, no, I don't fight this way with my friends. I said, why don't you fight this way with your friends? He says, well, if I did, then they wouldn't be my friends. I said, well, then why do you fight this way with your sister? And he said, well, because she can't stop being my sister. And I said, you know, be careful, because the more you practice this way of conflict and fighting, you're going to do it later. And he said, well, how do you... No, I wouldn't do that. And I said, how does your mom deal with you when you do something wrong? And he smiled. And I said, what? He goes, she does the same thing I do with my sister. In other words, you learn a negative pattern, and then you repeat it long enough that it becomes second nature. So one of the things that we have to recognize with anger is that we've learned a way to deal with our anger wrongly. And we do it so much that eventually we're captivated. And St. Paul would even say it bypasses our free will. And so how do we start to recover the right use of anger? Well, we have to start using anger rightly. And at first it might only be once every 2 months. Oh, I just used anger rightly. But we keep at it. And eventually we start using anger the right way. And slowly we turn off the faucet on the unrighteous use of anger, and we turn on the faucet of the righteous use of anger, and we've flipped the reality. Now, when we're in the process of moving from the one to the other, what do we do? Well, some of the practical steps that have come through the church is we start with the idea of not showing anger. Okay, so you go into your room and your kids have just trashed it because they built a fort. Am I talking about something that might have happened? Right? They got everything out. And it's demoed basically. And you're like, this is going to take 2 hours to put back together. And so here's your opportunity. You could start screaming and yelling at everybody. Or you could not show your displeasure, right? And you could speak calmly, lovingly. Now you might need a break before you see them. Might need to take a little walk around the block and then come back. Or they've taken out your prized whatever and broken it, So you have to begin with not showing visible anger. Now, is that godly? Is that what Christ does? He does, except in the instance in which something unrighteous is occurring. Right? He shows anger or displeasure with Peter when Peter says, oh, you can't be crucified. Remember in Matthew 16? And he gets hot with him. He shows it when he faces the religious leaders who out of the hardness of their heart cannot see why he should heal a man with a withered hand on the Sabbath. See? He uses his anger rightly. Right? So if my son punches his sister in the face, I can get angry at that act. You cannot hit somebody in the face. That is wrong. and I can stop it. That's not using anger wrongly, is it? No. But if I then grind on him, you and you're, that's using anger wrongly, right? So anger is to be used to stop an unrighteous reality. Hillary, what were you going to say?
So in that same vein, how do we stop ourselves between that feeling of anger and acting upon it?
Right.
Would you say you pray right then in that moment? Do you take a deep breath in that moment? And at a practical level, I think that we have so many opportunities in our day.
We do. I would say to you, at first, there will be no control over your anger. Because why? You're how old?
32.
Okay, you're 32. So I would guess that probably for 31 years and maybe many months, you've been doing it wrong.
Right.
And so to have the expectation that, okay, well, now I know what anger is supposed to be used for, and I'm all of a sudden do it right, that's the definition of insanity. But to begin with the notion that anger can be used rightly, and then to start to work on it, then over time, like I said, you might one time get it right in 2 months. But you stay at it. And then, okay, I don't know if you've heard the story, but the first sin that I really decided, by God's grace, I wanted to work on took 17 years. But then once that sin was overcome, the next one came a little bit quicker, right? So, this anger thing is something that in the modern day is rampant. We have anger all over the place.
And we're justified in it.
And we're justified in it.
You never humiliate a person.
No.
And you never tear a person apart because they're the image of God. But you direct it towards what happened.
Well, sure, that's the right way, but that's not generally how I do it. I usually go after the person. You see, I really want to humiliate them. I want to win.
The wrong way.
Right, I'm just saying, but that's what I've done for most of my life. So to have the expectation that after hearing what we said in the last 5 minutes, I'm going to go out and do it differently, that's not the case. But if I begin the spiritual work and I diligently work at it and I have integrity, well, if I ask the Lord for a fish, He's not going to hand me a stone, right? So He sees that integrity. Now, He may challenge it and give me situations in which my anger will more readily come to the surface, but I've asked for the fish. So He's trying to give it to me. Now, you say, do I take a deep breath? This is the spiritual wisdom that I've been taught from the church, that in those initial stages, breaks are needed. Lots of them. And that's because there's an inflammation. And we don't know how to... I'll put it this way. When you are chronically inflamed, physically speaking, biologically speaking, doctors are very concerned about you getting another inflammation because the body is overtaxed, and any new inflammation is very hard for the body to deal with. And so then you get the system gets overwhelmed. Well, I think anger is the situation in which most of us are over-inflamed. And so, you look at it this way, like when we were on vacation last week, there was another family in the complex that we were staying in, and I got to know the dad. And he was Catholic, and he found out I was a Greek Orthodox priest, and he was like, all right, I'm asking all my questions. So all week long, it was like the theological hour every time I was down at the beach. So I'd kind of look for where this guy was, and because I was like, I'm on vacation, So anyway, it was fine. But one of the things that came up is he's got 3 children. And his one son did something really boneheaded one day. They had rented a paddleboard, and his son did something that, generally you'd lose your stuff over. And his dad was like, it's fine. And I said, that was very gracious of you. And he said, yeah, I can only get there when I'm on vacation. In other words, he had an opportunity to have his inflammations calm down, and so then he could deal rightly. But trust me, if you follow that process and you keep doing that, then over time, your ability to fight an inflammation or to be in a non-inflamed state actually reduces itself. And then, unlike the patient who can't handle one more inflammation, you can handle one, and you're able to deal with the situation, right? So at first, the kids... I remember I told one dad, if your kid lights the house on fire, I want you to go buy marshmallows. And he was like, are you serious? I'm like, I am actually dead serious. Because he was so inflamed with anger all the time that I said, you can't show any displeasure with your children anymore because you've already shot the wad. They already think you hate them. So you're done. But what if they, wreck the car? Good. Get a sledgehammer out and bang the other side in and make a match, because you're done with anger. Right? Until you can get uninflamed. And then you might be able to use it rightly. So first we start with just not even showing any visible signs of anger. So you're driving down the road and someone cuts you off. It's not okay for you to flip them off. It's not okay for you to honk. Because if you've seen the bumper sticker, keep honking, I'm reloading. Have you seen that? I saw it the other day. I was in a big old truck. Yeah, it is kind of funny. I kind of laugh. My favorite is, when the rapture happens, can I have your car? That's good? I like that one, right? There's several theological things going in there. One, I don't believe in the rapture. B, I won't be raptured out. I'm one of the sinners. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Anger.
I was going to mention that I think it's so important that you couch it in terms of spiritual wisdom, because I think this is a really good example of where the church has had the benefit of a couple thousand years worth of experience.
Yeah.
And we can't just put things in psychological terms.
Right.
And we can't just put them in Gnostic, kind of out there spiritual terms. Right. And because psychology would say, up until recently, when you're angry, just vent it.
Yeah.
Get it out, because if you get it out, then it won't be there. It's fascinating that they've since realized that the more that you vent it, it's kind of like venting a fire. A fire will stay small until you give it,
clamp it,
opportunities for oxygen,
right?
And it just
So the wisdom of the church is the first sign is to not vent. Don't spread the conflagration, right? Do not show a visible sign of anger, right? Now, one of the other things that people say is if you decided you're going to go about attacking your anger, the other thing to do is to actually set a very I want to say regimented schedule, but that might sound off to you. What most people find, and the church has always kind of noticed this, is that as you increase busyness and distractedness, then anger has more opportunity. As you create more order, then anger actually has less. Look at it this way. Who is the God of order? Who is the Logos? Christ. So when you go, for those of you who visited St. Paisios, you go in, is everything just... Now, it doesn't feel like they're like OCD, right? It's not like that. And they don't feel like they're scrupulous and overbearing, but it's clean, it's tidy, everything has its place, there's a rhythm, right? They don't overwork, they don't underwork, everything it flows, right?
I think it's more than that. You reduce noise, you reduce
yes.
chaos, you
right,
reduce
all of that.
stuff.
Yes. So most parents, I'll say, when do you get mad with your kid? And when I really get them to be honest, they're usually on their phone, trying to do something they want to do, while the kid's hungry, right? And the TV's going, and the UPS guy's just shown up, right? And the dinner's on the stove, right? And so it's amazing how when we start to put ourselves in a very, like you said, you reduce the noise, you reduce the rhythm, you reduce the busyness, and then all of a sudden, right, there's a stillness. And stuff, yeah. Then all of a sudden, right, so that's the third thing, is this sort of material connection. So we talked about refraining from saying something. We talked about setting up the schedule. The third thing is stuff. Actually, the fast will take away anger. But it has to be a real fast. It has to be a fast from all things material. Believe it or not, the material world causes anger. St. James says it. Why do you war? What does he say? I'm paraphrasing. Because you want something you don't have. That's why St. James... Now, St. James... Don't mess with St. James, man. St. James was he was in the stratosphere when it came to spiritual understanding. And yet, like what you said just a moment ago, St. James always put things, what's pure religion? To serve the widows and the orphans in their affliction. Right? And if you say to your brother, be warmed and of good cheer, but give him nothing to eat or drink, right? So St. James, man, he was in the stratosphere, but he could just put it right there. And so what does he say you war? Why do you anger? Because you want stuff. Right? Why is anger increasing? Why is road rage increasing? Because the material culture that we press upon our kids, I mean, kids have uncontrolled rage at this point, and they're teenagers. Right? Well, they've got so many gadgets, so many distractions, that they can't even deal, right? They're so overstimulated or overwrought, right? So some of us who are older can remember being bored. You know, I can remember I got nothing to do. You know, I mean, I had my chores, right? But it was quiet. You know, go ahead, Lois.
My daughter sends me pictures all the time.
Uh-huh.
And one day she said, a busy day at our house. And there were 4 rooms where my 5-year-old grandchild had played. But I noticed that in each place there was the basket or the plastic bucket that everything went back into. And she has taught him to do that.
Yeah.
So I mean, her place is...
Yeah, she's got it ordered.
And the kids know it. And when they come in from the garage, you open that drawer and you put those little shoes in and you close it.
Right.
And she's taught them from the beginning because she cannot stand clutter.
Well,
and so she never gets angry.
Right.
Because of the mess.
Right. Right.
And
That's what I'm saying.
How smart.
Yeah, you have to start to create that order. The other thing that can happen, and this is the 4th step I wanted to get to, and that is you have to create the quiet space.
What she does.
People you have to learn to be quiet. So, you get in the car. You don't need to have something going. After dinner, it's okay to say, all right, everybody read quietly. To have the ability to be quiet and hear yourself think, to process. We call that prayer. The modern world calls it mindfulness. And they have apps for it. We used to have church bells.
It's ironic. It's like get on your phone.
Yeah, get on your phone and calm down. Kathy?
I think kids have a real innate sense for that, but it's not often nourished. And I know when Reagan comes over for a sleepover, she wants no electricity,
Yeah.
no gizmos. She wants to light candles, and she just wants to sit and talk and play games.
Yep.
And there's that innate part of children who crave that. If they're given a chance to tap into that, they love it.
Yeah, we see it every year at camp because the first day when they check in their devices, they are ready to, lose their ever-living minds. And then by the 2nd or 3rd day, when I'm doing sounding board at night with a lot of the cabins, they'll say, "Oh, what are some things you like?" They're like, "I love the fact that I don't have video games or a phone or a TV. That things are quiet and."
And we gave them the opportunity to discover that.
Yeah, and they love that, right? They love that. So we have to have that for ourselves if we're working on anger, right? So we've just given 4 very practical things that we do, right? Okay? And overarching all of that is the idea that if we're inflamed, to give ourselves a break. It is okay, you come home, the fort's been made, and you just walk out of the... unless there's physical danger... then you just let it ride out until you're in a position where you can actually address it. Okay?
You could join them.
You could join them. Yeah, and certain things you should be joining them, right? No doubt, right? Build the fort alongside with them, right? That's why I said to the one father, kid lights a house on fire, you go get marshmallows. That's what I want you to do. Derek?
2 things. One,